Right now, one of the top races on the ballot for the November election. Who will be New Jersey's next U.S. Senator? Democratic Congressman Andy Kim from Morristown and Republican hotelier Curtis Bashaw from Cape May going head-to-head. Both candidates vying for the seat currently held by George Helmy, the man appointed by the governor following Bob Menendez's resignation. Key issues on the table tonight: inflation, immigration, healthcare, reproductive rights, and more. The questions you want answers to. News 12's election debate starts now. Good evening, everyone. I'm Eric Landskroner. Welcome to News 12 New Jersey's Race for U.S. Senate debate. For the next hour, the candidates will be talking about the issues that matter to you, right here from our Edison studio. Before we get started, welcome to our viewers watching on TV, on our YouTube channel, and streaming on News 12 New York. Let's meet the candidates. Democratic Congressman Andy Kim, who has served 3 terms in New Jersey's 3rd Congressional District. He's facing off against Republican Curtis Bashaw, a hotel developer known for revitalizing the historic Congress Hall Hotel in Cape May. This will be the 3rd and final time these two will debate before the November election. Now, over the course of the next hour, the candidates will answer your questions. Both have agreed to the News 12 debate guidelines. They will each have a minute and a half to answer questions, 30 seconds for rebuttal. Gentlemen, 2 weeks until the election, and a majority of voters still don't really know you, according to a recent Stockton poll. With that, your opening statements. You each will have a minute. Mr. Bashaw actually won the earlier coin toss and has chosen to give his opening remarks second. So, Congressman Kim, you are first.
Yeah, thank you. Well, thank you to News 12 for hosting us. Hi, everyone. I'm Congressman Andy Kim, and it's a humbling experience being able to step up to run for the U.S. Senate. I know I'm not central casting of what many think a senator looks like, but I'm a public school kid, a son of immigrants. I'm not from a wealthy, well-connected family, but I believe in a politics for everybody, a politics that is not an exclusive club. And I've tried to step up to represent everybody. I listen to people about the challenges that they're facing. Veterans in Ocean County telling me about the poor quality of health care that they're able to get, that they're not getting all of the services that they need. And I was able to help work in a bipartisan way to deliver a brand new $60 million state-of-the-art VA health clinic in Ocean County that is going to open its doors today through the very first veterans to be able to serve. That's the kind of results that you deserve. You deserve not performance, not theater. You deserve results. And that's the kind of senator I'll be for New Jersey. Thank you.
Congressman Kim, thank you. Mr. Bashaw.
I'm running for U.S. Senate because I think New Jersey is ready for change. I don't think we should keep sending political insiders, career politicians to represent us in Washington like Bob Menendez or Andy Kim. I'm a businessman. I started working at the Jersey Shore when I was 13 years old. I built my business to over 1,000 employees through renovations of landmarks like Congress Hall. And like most New Jersey families, my business lives by a budget. I don't think that we can spend our way to prosperity. Now, you're going to see people try to put me in a box, but I am Curtis Bashaw and no one else. I've been with my husband, Will, for 22 years. I am pro-choice, pro-parent, pro-business, and I believe in common sense. I believe we need to support law enforcement and secure our open border so we can make New Jersey safe and affordable again. I look forward to convincing you that I'm the best candidate here tonight.
Mr. Bashaw, Congressman Kim, thank you so much. And gentlemen, this evening, you will be answering questions coming straight from our viewers, so let's get started. Our first topic is affordability. Forbes recently found New Jersey had the 5th highest cost of living in the nation in 2024, inflation only making matters worse. In fact, the inflation rate in the state is a full percentage point higher than the national rate. So translation here, it just costs more to live here and to buy things. But don't take my word for it. Let's listen to Marcus Keys from Franklin Township.
How can we boost the economy? What can we do about the job market? There's a lot of people out here struggling. And also inflation. You go to the grocery store, you spend almost twice, if not triple, than what you spent in the past. So we need to do something about that.
All right, Congressman Kim, we'll start with you. How have you or will you work to keep costs lower for New Jerseyans if elected to the Senate?
Well, this is the top issue that I hear about on the campaign trail. So many families struggling. That's why I've made it my top priority when working over the last 6 years, for instance, to drop prescription drug costs. be able to make sure that we're keeping those costs low, capping insulin costs at $35 a month, making sure that we're capping prescription drug costs for seniors. And now we're trying to make sure we're moving forward on having the kind of agenda to be able to build, to make sure we can lower housing costs for so many people right now that are struggling. The way I hear it is people saying it feels like death from 1,000 cuts. Making sure we're taking that effort to be able to secure our supply chain, to make sure we are not going to be susceptible to the global shocks before that we saw causing so much of the inflation and the challenges that are squeezing American families right now. Those are the types of steps that we must make sure that we are stepping forward on. In the meantime, I'm also engaged in efforts to support our small businesses. I've been a member of the Small Business Committee for a number of years in Congress, making sure that our small businesses have the access to capital, to be able to address the racial wealth gap, to be able to address the kind of investments that so many families need, not for tax breaks for the biggest corporations and the wealthiest Americans, but instead supporting our middle class, supporting the businesses that are driving so much of the engine of our economy here in New Jersey. So those are the steps that I've taken and what I continue to hope to do in the U.S. Senate.
Congressman Kim, thank you. Same question, Mr. Bashaw. How will you work to keep costs lower?
Look, this is a contrast between my opponent and myself. I'm a businessman. I live by a budget. I don't think that the solution to inflation is spending more money or old 20th century price cap models. We need to unshackle our businesses and grow our economy. We cannot spend our way to prosperity. We cannot tax our way to fiscal health. And we cannot regulate our way to growth and innovation. So I believe that we need to make sure that we stop passing trillions and trillions of dollars of spending as if that's going to solve inflation. That's going to make it worse. We saw that coming out of COVID. We've seen that with the Inflation Reduction Act. And so I believe that we need to be fiscally conservative in how we spend so that we can bring inflation down, and we need to unleash our businesses to pursue the American dream and grow the economy so that we all prosper more.
All right, Mr. Bashaw, Congressman Kim, do you care to rebut?
Yeah, well, look, I want to say what we tried to do is invest in the American people. I think it's good for us to invest in our infrastructure, a bipartisan infrastructure law that's supported by Democrats and Republicans, helping rebuild our roads, our bridges, our tunnels. It's helping our economy. The efforts we did with the CHIPS and Science Act, bipartisan legislation, investing in advanced manufacturing right here at home. So I disagree with my opponent here. I think it's important for our government to take a role in spurring innovation and creating jobs and creating that kind of momentum forward that's going to help so many families.
Gentlemen, let's stay on the topic of affordability because, as you both know, New Jersey has the highest property taxes in the nation. That's nothing news, according to the Tax Foundation. That said, you both could play a role in essentially putting thousands of dollars back into the pockets of New Jersey taxpayers and homeowners. A lot of viewers want to know just how high up on your priority list a full restoration of SALT or the state and local tax deduction would be. Mr. Bashaw, I'll start with you.
Look, I think New Jersey is 49th out of the 50 states in what we get back from the federal government. That's under a Democratic monopoly on the Senate seat for the last 50 years. We can do better. I don't like being second to last. We are second or third or fourth largest contributor to the federal budget. We are a donor state. And so to ease and take back the cap on the SALT deduction, I think is essential for fairness for New Jersey. For far too long, we've been on a race to the bottom. Affordability is a big issue. But we're not going to get there through tax and spend policies. We're going to get there by unregulating our businesses and growing our economy so New Jersey can be affordable again. I live by a budget every year at our hotels. It's budget season. The team comes in, they want to raise the budget 10 or 11%. You can't do that if your revenues aren't growing. You've got to have more discipline, which is why I think we need political outsiders and business people in Washington representing New Jersey. And I also think we need a Republican senator down there to give it a go. We've been 50 years with 2 Democrats, and we are 49th out of the 50 states in what we get back. We can do better.
Mr. Bashaw, thank you. Congressman Kim, I'll allow you to respond to that, but also, of course, to the initial question, which is about how high up on your priority list would eliminating the cap on salt be for you?
Well, I know this is so important to so many New Jersey families right now, so I want to tell you directly, this is very high on my list to make sure that we are tackling this salt tax cap and the squeeze that it's been putting on so many families here. And let's remember why we're in this problem to start with. That we have former President Trump who put forward this tax cap on New Jersey residents, something that was a direct attack upon us and a number of other states. He made it very clear why he was doing this, for political purposes. Not only that, where was the resources then going? He was giving huge tax breaks to the biggest corporations and the wealthiest Americans, and that's not the priority that New Jersey families want. And that's why I disagree with my opponent, Mr. Bashaw here, someone who supports strongly Donald Trump, supports his agenda, someone who supported the president that put us in this position to start with. And I think it's important for us to recognize that. So yes, I want to make sure that we're addressing this. And I've been pressing Speaker Mike Johnson to be able to bring this to a vote, allow us to be able to move forward. And we can have sensible tax policies here that's supporting our middle class, supporting those that need support, while asking those and making sure that businesses and the biggest businesses and the wealthiest people in this country that pay their fair share. And that, I think, is that sense of fairness that so many people want right now. And especially when we're feeling people squeezed so much, we want to make sure we're designing things in a way that's helping all Americans.
Mr. Bashaw, rebuttal?
Certainly. You know, Congressman, I know it would be easier for you if you were running against Donald Trump. You're not. You're running against Curtis Bashaw. I'm from Cape May, and I'm a businessman in New Jersey running for U.S. Senate. And I will just say that I think for New Jersey, it is more practical and better on these budget issues, on what we get back, to have one Republican down there caucusing with Republicans to get things done for our state.
Gentlemen, let's move on. We have many more topics to get to. Listen, you both know this. You've seen the headlines. We're fresh off what's been described as a summer of hell in New Jersey for commuters. And by that, of course, I mean delay after delay after delay for commuters who take NJ Transit. And that's something that's top of mind for Morgan from Kenilworth.
What are we going to do about the constant delays on NJ Transit that are due to Amtrak?
So there you go. Listen, much of the chaos, as you know, has been blamed on those catenary overhead wires on this stretch of the Northeast Corridor, and that's owned by Amtrak. What would you do in the Senate, both of you, to ensure accountability and to ensure the necessary infrastructure upgrades are made to this crucial artery? Again, I'll start with Mr. Bashaw this time.
Well, thanks for the question, and I will say this. You have two big bureaucracies dealing with our transit system, one of the most important and amazing commuter transit systems in the country. Between Amtrak and New Jersey Transit, you have bloated bureaucracies that aren't accountable, and we need to hold them accountable for their work. We need measurements. We need to get in there. In the U.S. Senate, I want to unpack exactly this kind of issue. Get down and understand why they can't talk to each other, why they're pointing the fingers back and forth. And quite frankly, in our business, in my hotels, you check in late, we're going to make some competition for you, compensation. And I think that accountability, like airlines now have for our transit system, will help them do better. But I think that we have to make sure that these bureaucracies are held accountable to their goals, and that the goals are clear so that the consumers and the bureaucracies know where they're headed.
Congressman Kim.
The people of New Jersey deserve reliable transit, to be able to know that they can get to work on time, that they can get home to their families on time. You know, I remember earlier this summer, I was up in New York coming back down into New Jersey, and I got stuck at Penn Station for hours because all the trains were canceled, and uncertain how I was going to get home in time to be able to get my kids to bed. And these are challenges that people are facing, and it is absolutely inexcusable, which is why we want to make sure that we have that plan going forward, which is what we've been demanding with this bipartisan infrastructure law that we were able to pass, be able to bring back hundreds of millions of dollars to upgrade our systems, be able to make sure that we don't have these problems going forward, to be able to bring together Amtrak and NJ Transit, to be able to show how it is that we can have a path going forward, who is going to be accountable for which part of these problems. And that's what we've been sorting out this summer, because we cannot allow this to happen again. So many families have been struggling, especially in New Jersey, where our transit, our infrastructure is our lifeblood. This is how it is that we get to work, and I know that by my wife, takes NJ Transit to work every day she goes to work. I take NJ Transit all across the state. We want to make sure that we are moving forward in a way that is addressing this. So yes, we have taken action at the federal level for accountability, working with the state level to be able to come up with the solutions and be able to make sure that we have the resources, because we know we can't wave a magic wand. The Gateway Tunnel, these other efforts are critically important for the future of New Jersey.
All right, let's move on to our next topic, gentlemen. And this is a contentious issue, as you know, once again, immigration. A new Stockton poll finds 57% of all voters in New Jersey, including a third of Democrats, would support a national effort to deport immigrants living in the U.S. illegally. This is an issue that's weighing on Bernadette Gold from Cranford, who asked this.
What do they intend to do about the migrant crisis?
Okay, so as New Jersey is a sanctuary state, how is the migrant crisis affecting New Jersey, and what would you do to address it, Congressman Kim?
Well, a couple of steps. First and foremost, I say this as someone who is a son of immigrants, married to an immigrant, that we want to continue to make sure that America is a country that embraces people being able to come in to innovate here, grow businesses here. But I'm also someone that worked in national security, worked in counterterrorism, wanting to make sure that we keep our country safe. I've supported bipartisan measures to be able to secure our border, to be able to make sure that we are taking the steps to ensure that we have control over our borders, land, sea, and air, be able to make sure that our sovereignty is protected on that front. But when we look at the challenges that we face in terms of large migrant communities in New Jersey and around the country, the fundamental reason why we're having so much challenge there is also because we have not invested in our judicial process there. We have only 682 federal immigration judges in this country right now. They have a 3 million case backlog. That would take them 10 years just to be able to get through the existing cases. There is bipartisan legislation to dramatically increase the number of judges that we have while we're increasing our investment in border security. That is the kind of step that can allow us to be able to address this. We shouldn't be having 6 to 8 years per immigration case. We should be able to do that in less than 6 months. This is going to help us make sure that we don't have these backlogs, we don't have the challenges that are faced, while we're still respecting the ability for us to be able to be a country of immigrants.
Mr. Bashaw.
Look, this answer sounds like Washington, D.C. to me. Common sense would dictate, if that's all true, why did we have the border open for the last 4 years under Biden, Harris, and your administrations? I mean, you voted 7 times against border security measures that were common sense. And we have had maybe 500,000 illegals living in New Jersey, sapping resources. I understand, and I know from the field that voters are very restless about this issue. It's not only a safety and security issue, it's an issue of economics. We're going to talk about expensive housing in New Jersey. 500,000 people is 5% of our population in our state. That's a huge amount of people that need homes, and they're already scarce and not affordable. So I'm for common sense. We need to close the border, secure it now to illegal immigration. That's just like locking your house at night when you go to sleep. I went to the border. I stood there from 12:30 to 3 in the morning and watched 62 people come unfettered into our country as if they were on TSA pre-check. From Syria, from China. Why? Because Washington has conflated these issues, confused them. We just need a secure border, and then we need to make a legitimate immigration policy for our country that works for everybody.
Congressman Kim, rebuttal?
Well, it's really important, and I agree. We want to make sure we have border security. We want to make sure that we are taking those steps. And as I said, I'm somebody that's worked in national security. I feel strongly about that as well. But we want to make sure that we are doing this in a comprehensive way to try to address it. There's no magic wand that we can wave. We want to make sure we're doing this. And what we don't want is we don't want just the toxic rhetoric, attacking Haitian migrants and others in our community who are here because they're trying to build a better life. And I hope that we can all agree upon that.
Gentlemen, let's move on right now. In the past week, as you both know, we learned that the terrorist and architect of Hamas's rampage on October 7th, Yahya Sinwar, was killed. Hamas, however, announced immediately that the 101 remaining hostages in Gaza, including Tenafly's Idan Alexander, won't be freed until the war ends. New Jersey, as you both know, is home to large Jewish and Palestinian populations who are closely watching what's going on in the Middle East. That said, Aaron Goldblatt from Bedminster has this question for you both.
My question revolves around the Middle East and what their thoughts are on the ongoing crisis with Israel, and do they unequivocally support the state of Israel and its right to exist?
All right, Congressman Kim, your answer to that question, as a potential U.S. Senator, what would be your strategy to then bring about an end to the crisis?
Yeah, this is such a heartbreaking challenge and crisis, one of the biggest that we face right now. And when we saw just the horrors of October 7th, I was there with the Jewish community here in New Jersey, commemorating the 1-year anniversary, and seeing the families of the hostages and talking to them over the course of this last year. I cannot imagine what they have gone through. So yes, we see a situation right now with Hamas, Hezbollah, Iran, these different adversaries that don't believe in Israel's right to exist, and that needs to be countered. Israel has a right to exist, a right to be able to defend itself. Now, what we want to make sure going forward is we think about the 101 hostages that are still held, and trying to make sure that we can get them back as soon as humanly possible. And that's where I think the pressure and the priority needs to be, and the work that we need to do to try to build. We know that there's not a military-only solution to this. The longer this war goes on, the longer the conflict stretches, the further reaches that it goes, the harder it is for us to be able to see how it is that we're going to find a hostage deal to bring the hostages home, to be able to bring this violence to a close, and try to build a durable security going forward that is going to allow the people in the region, including the Israeli people, to be able to have the kind of security that they deserve, rather than these cycles of violence that we continue to see. So those are the steps, as someone who's worked in national security, in diplomacy, I want to make sure we do.
Mr. Bashaw, your answer to that question.
Well, I can't tell from that answer whether he thinks there's a moral equivalency between Hamas and Israel. I mean, my answer is I believe Israel has a right to exist. It has a right not only to defend itself, but to win. It was attacked in a brutal way by a organization. I mean, my opponent supported recognizing Iran again after the nuclear deal, normalizing relations, releasing the sanctions that financed Hezbollah and Hamas, was calling for a ceasefire right after the terrorist attack. I don't know why Hamas could release those hostages anytime and have a ceasefire. So I don't think the U.S., we know we don't negotiate with terrorists. Why do we expect Israel to? I don't see a moral equivalency between the two. Good for Israel for getting the leader of Hezbollah. That's important. That will move this down the field. But I think Israel has a right not only to defend itself, but to win this war, and I support their existence.
Gentlemen, we need to pick up this conversation after the break.
Okay.
We'd have much more to get to on this topic. We'll actually continue that. Don't go anywhere. This is News 12's Debate, and we're just getting started. Plenty more to discuss. We've got reproductive rights, corruption, student loans, and more. We're back with the candidates right after this. Welcome back to News 12's election debate for U.S. Senate. Candidates Andy Kim and Curtis Bashaw answering questions from you, the viewer, because local elections lead to national change. Let's pick up where we left off right now. Congressman Kim, before the break, we were talking about the crisis in the Middle East. You wanted a chance for rebuttal.
Well, I did. Thank you for that, because I wanted to correct a lot of the misinformation that's out there. What I called for was a hostage deal, a bilateral negotiation, something I've worked on in the past in diplomacy to be able to make sure we're addressing this. It's the same thing that happened last November when Israel negotiated to be able to get the release of 105 hostages. So if my opponent has a problem with that, we'd like to hear that. But that's what we're trying to work on. I'm somebody that supported Iron Dome every year in Congress. I'm strong in terms of my support for Israel, but we want to make sure we're addressing how to get the hostages out as soon as possible.
All right, Congressman, let's stay on this topic right now. Mr. Bashaw, we have another viewer, Javon from Franklin, is also asking about the crisis in the Middle East. Let's listen in.
I think probably one of the most important topics now is Israel and Palestine. I think that because we continually send money over to Israel, despite all the things happening from hurricanes, from healthcare, everything that we've received less funding for, I'm curious to know what their stances are on Israel and Palestine.
Okay, so gentlemen, this is a question we've heard before in the context of sending money places like Ukraine and more recently like Lebanon, with critics questioning how much money is sent overseas when, for instance, the Southeast is just reeling now after being hit by two hurricanes there, something that we in New Jersey, of course, can relate to because of Sandy years ago. So, Mr. Bashaw, I'll have you respond to that question.
Thank you. I believe that we need to be supportive of our allies. We are a country that is part of the world, and we need to make sure that we are true to our friends and offer support. But I understand that it's very important for us to be safe and secure at home. When I fly on an airplane and go somewhere, there's a safety video and an oxygen mask comes down. And what do they say? They say, put the oxygen mask on your own face before you try to help the person next to you. So the idea that we need to be strong at home is very important. We need to have hurricane relief. And to me, this is why I come back to this porous, open border. That Biden, Harris, Kim, they have supported this open border that has created a backdoor into our country that is sapping resources that should be used for the homeland, for our citizens. So I support our allies, and I support accountability and how we support our allies. And I also understand why many people want to make sure we're taking care of ourselves at home, and we need to do that by holding people accountable at home for this open border. We have to secure it. It is a wound in our country that is creating an unlevel playing field and is further dividing us.
All right, Congressman Kim, your response and your answer additionally to Javon's question.
Yeah, thank you. Well, what I want to say is that, as someone who's worked in national security and diplomacy, we want to make sure that we're stepping up to be able to have the kind of global leadership that America can and should continue to do. And that does mean supporting our allies. I support Israel's right to defend itself. I support Ukraine's right to be able to defend itself against this invasion from Russia. The challenges that we see across our world right now. And there's a very scary and dangerous strand of neo-isolationism that former President Trump and others are continuing to push right now that are trying to make it seem like it's zero-sum. I do think that, as a son of South Korean immigrants, my parents born at the end of the Korean War, America can and should continue to be a force for good, a force for democracy, force for human rights all around the world. And that is something that strengthens us. When we invest in the CHIPS and Science Act, invest in our own capabilities, innovation, but we can also build out coalitions with other countries around the world that strengthen us, be able to help us better compete with China and other competitors around the world. And that affects our economy back home. It is something that affects our jobs back home. I want us to be able to continue to be strong in that kind of capacity. And when we see the dangers of what former President Trump has been pushing forward on the global stage, his America First approach very much showing that it's America only. And I think that's only going to further isolate us. And I think the people of America understand how dangerous that would be and how much that will hurt our economy.
Mr. Bashaw, care for a rebuttal?
Certainly. We need to have results. We can't just keep talking about diplomacy and hostage exchanges. One of my favorite foreign policy moments in my lifetime was when Ronald Reagan stood at that Berlin Wall and he said, "Mr. Gorbachev, tear down that wall." There was moral clarity behind that. There was peace through strength. I think that we've had a kind of a befuddled foreign policy for the last 4 years.
Okay, let's move on now. Since October 7th, gentlemen, we have witnessed an explosion of anti-Semitism in this country. According to the ADL, anti-Semitic incidents have risen by over 200% in America since the attacks, over 500% on college campuses. In fact, the ADL actually gave Princeton and Rutgers grades of D for how they've dealt with anti-Semitism on campus. Rutgers president, you both saw this, was called before Congress to answer to the, quote, intensity and pervasiveness of anti-Semitism at the school. If elected, how would you deal with this? And if universities do not take concrete steps to address not only anti-Semitism but Islamophobia on campus, what consequences should they face? Congressman Kim.
Yeah, this is so scary right now, just the level of hate and vitriol that's being exposed within our society. I mean, I hear from so many parents that are worried about their kids going off to the college and just seeing the level of anti-Semitism rising within our own communities here in New Jersey. And continuing to see that inflamed, this is one of the big challenges that we face, and we have to make sure we're tackling it. It's something that I've taken on since day one of my time in Congress. When I was representing Ocean County, seeing hate and vitriol from a Facebook group that was targeting the Jewish community, especially the Orthodox community in Lakewood and throughout Ocean County. And that is something I stood with leaders on, working together to be able to push back and stop and actually be able to get that Facebook group taken down. These are concrete actions that we were able to do before. And now with this rise, we need to make sure we have even greater tools. I support a piece of legislation called the Countering Anti-Semitism Act. This is the largest investment and a piece of action legislation that in our country's history to combat anti-Semitism. It is not just words, it is resources, including the Nonprofit Security Grant Program, which is the top priority that I hear from temples and synagogues across New Jersey, making sure that we can increase their security, having a counter anti-Semitism coordinator across the entirety of our United States. These are the types of actions that we need to make sure we're stepping up. And if colleges and universities don't abide by these, yes, there should be penalties.
Mr. Bashaw.
I believe that there's, again, a clarity issue. My opponent actually voted against the Anti-Semitism Awareness Act on May 1st that was introduced by his own Democratic colleague in New Jersey, Josh Gottheimer. So that I don't understand. It's always a little bit of this, a little bit of that. But to me, I went to Rutgers. I stood there at that encampment and watched it. And I saw the words scribbled on those signs. And I thought to myself, if this was words against a gay group, if this was words against another racial minority group, Merrick Garland would have had the Attorney General's office down there investigating. We cannot share our freedoms unequally. We can't pick and choose who we protect because one's in political favor and one isn't. The scourge of anti-Semitism, we have to have clarity about it, and we need to be strong because that's always been a bellwether to other forms of tyranny. Israel's the only democracy in the Middle East. And what's happening right now with this anti-Semitism is a terrible thing. We need to get consistent. We need to hold schools accountable. I called for the RAs at Rutgers to resign when they walked out of anti-Semitism training. I was an RA in college. I had to be there for all students in the dorm, not just, pick and choose who we were going to support and defend and who we weren't.
Mr. Bashaw, thank you. Congressman Kim, I want to touch on something that Mr. Bashaw just said a moment ago. He mentioned Congressman Gottheimer's Anti-Semitism Awareness Act. You were only one of two members of New Jersey's congressional delegation to vote against that. Why?
I'm glad you raised it because I wanted to have a rebuttal here, because the reason why is we want to make sure that we don't play political games when it comes to something as important as anti-Semitism. And when we see Speaker Mike Johnson ignoring the Countering Anti-Semitism Act, which actually has resources and money, not just in words, but actual resources that are going to help keep people safe. Instead, he pushes a more divisive piece of legislation because he wants to score political points. And while he's doing that, he is trying to slash the budget of the Office of Civil Rights at the Department of Education that oversees and investigates these cases of anti-Semitism and other discrimination. So those are the types of things we cannot play political games, partisan games when it comes to anti-Semitism. We have a piece of legislation that can unite the Congress and actually push forward real resources, money to be able to support these programs, be able to have real security for so many people that are worried. That's what people deserve right now. They don't want, niceties in terms of just language. They want to make sure that there's some real teeth to it, and that this is something that we can push forward on with the level of urgency that is needed. Yes, we want to stand up to be able to face against all types of discrimination. And I know when there was increased discrimination against the Asian American community, it was Jewish leaders here in New Jersey that were some of the first to step up and have our backs. We step up against hate in all forms, and that is something that I will always do in the U.S. Senate.
Mr. Bashaw, a quick rebuttal here. The congressman just mentioned he accused you of politicizing the issue. He's said that in the past. How do you respond?
I don't know how I'm politicizing any issue right here. I think that's a great fallback that people go to try to get away from the fact that their policies are obfuscating the basic common sense facts. Jewish students have been mistreated on our campuses. We haven't held them accountable. Rutgers caved and negotiated 8 points with them. It's just not right.
All right, gentlemen, thank you. On the minds of many New Jersey voters right now is crime, more specifically home invasions, car thefts, burglaries. Here at News 12, we've covered a number of these crimes. Back in March, we told you, the folks at home, about a homeowner in Howell who had actually was seen on video. He pulled out his gun after 3 people broke into his home in the middle of the night. And that said, Liam Gavin, who is a hospital security guard from Morton Borough, wants to know this. He said, how would you vote on a federal level stand your ground law and why? Mr. Bashaw, I'll start with you.
We have a right in the United States to defend ourselves. We have a right to keep and bear arms. We know that crime is more pervasive, and especially in people's perceptions, smaller crimes. We've had really crazy bail reforms. We aren't holding young people accountable to crimes. We have an open border and lots of strangers in our community. So as it relates to stand my ground, I think that a human being has a right to protect their family, their home, their children, their grandchildren. And so we need to look at this carefully. We need to make sure that we are keeping our children safe. And we need to protect the Second Amendment. And we also need to make sure we're keeping our children and families safe. So this is an area that needs bipartisanship. One of the reasons I'm going to Washington. We need to work across the aisle, caucus with both parties, and pull people together to get common sense reforms done that protect our liberties, that protect our families, and that make sense for New Jersey.
Congressman Kim.
Yeah. The security and safety of our families, of our communities, at the top of the list. I mean, this is why my parents wanted to raise me and my sister in New Jersey. And now I have a family, and I want to make sure that they can have the safety. And we see how concerning that is right now more than ever. And that's something we want to make sure we're investing. That's why I've worked to be able to address and provide funding to Cinnaminson and to Stafford Township and others in terms of increasing law enforcement support, increasing types of resources at the federal level to be able to engage. When it comes to some of these other ideas, with Stand Your Ground, this is something, well, yes, we do have a right to defend ourselves, but we've seen how that practice has been utilized in some states in a way that defends people's use of firearms in very dangerous ways as well. So we have to be very careful about, these types of efforts to be able to move forward. We have a scourge of gun violence in our communities, and we want to make sure that this is not a situation where we see the blatant use of gun violence, sometimes targeting unarmed civilians, unarmed pedestrians who are accidentally walking by on someone's property. We've seen a lot of those types of situations. So I'd be very careful about this given the track record that we've seen. That doesn't mean we're not going to take strong action to be able to keep our community safe, to make sure we're addressing the issues. And while we're doing that, yes, we should be able to have common sense efforts like universal background checks for gun safety to be able to make sure we can better keep our communities safe.
All right, I want to turn now to reproductive rights, gentlemen, a topic that, of course, as you know, is a top issue for many voters. Here in New Jersey, the right to an abortion was codified into state law in anticipation of the Dobbs decision. Seema Malhotra from Elizabeth has this question.
What would you do to make sure that women are protected and to reverse what's been done by the Supreme Court?
Mr. Bashaw, you have said that you are pro-choice, but you did support the Dobbs decision, which sent the issue of abortion back to the states. Can you explain your position and address Seema's concerns?
Certainly. I am pro-choice because I believe in freedom, domestic tranquility that we all have. I am married to my husband, and that's my choice. I believe that parents have a right to be informed about their kids. I think all these domestic issues are freedom issues, which is why I support a woman's right to choose. That decision is between her loved ones, her conscience, her medical providers. I understand what happened in Dobbs, where the court sent it back to the states because the Roe decision, they felt maybe overstretched what the Constitution said. The solution here, moving forward, is for us to codify into federal law to protect a woman's right to choose in all 50 states. And I would work in a bipartisan way to achieve that. Again, why I think it's important not to have two Democrats on the left side of their caucus, but to have a Republican from New Jersey caucusing to get these things done. So I am pro-choice. That's who I am. It's part of my DNA as a married gay man, and I would not do anything to take away a woman's right to choose, and would work to protect that federally in Washington with legislation.
Congressman Kim, you have taken issue with Mr. Bashaw saying that he is pro-choice. Why?
Well, because I'm essentially running against two different Curtis Bashaws. I'm running against a primary election Curtis Bashaw that said that he believes that the Dobbs decision was right. It should go back to the states. He, in May, in an interview, said that the federal level is absolutely the wrong place to adjudicate the issue when it comes to abortion. And then now he got through the primary election, got past the Republican primary, and now is taking on a very different tone, now saying he supports federal efforts to be able to do this, when just a few months ago, he specifically said it's the worst place to adjudicate the issues when it comes to abortion. So, this is the problem, is we don't know what to believe. And when we see this situation, what we see is just issues of opportunism rather than actual values here. I believe that the Constitution affords women's reproductive rights as a right in this country. The Dobbs decision specifically on page 1 said the Constitution does not confer rights on an abortion. I think that is a very clear distinction between us. I will fight for this. I will make sure we're engaged on this, make it a top priority. And what we do know is that if Mr. Bashaw is in the Senate, that having put forward a Republican Senate majority, that majority will absolutely block any effort to try to codify women's reproductive rights in this country. And that's what's at stake in this election.
I want to give you a chance to respond, Mr. Bashaw. In addition, is there a point in a pregnancy where you would restrict or prohibit abortion?
So my response, first of all, is that we agree that we will fight for this to protect a woman's right to choose. And I will say this, that when my party's right, I will agree with it and support it. And when my party's not right, I will stand up to it, because I am Curtis Bashaw, and that is who I am, and I am pro-choice. I think working on federal bipartisan legislation would lead us to a place of compromise where we wouldn't have policies that enable into the 9th month. And I think that that's a reasonable conversation to have, and also about parental consent for minor kids. Okay,
Mr. Bashaw. Congressman Kim, rebuttal.
Well, look, just as I said, in May, Mr. Bashaw, in a very different way, was saying, he is not a professional, does not have medical expertise to be able to make determinations in terms of when this is no longer something that should be acceptable in our country. What we see right now is we are in a situation where over a dozen states have full bans when it comes to abortion. 6 don't have any exemptions for the health of the mother. 10, no exemptions for rape. This is a situation right now where women do not have rights right now. They do not have a choice.
Gentlemen, we have to take a very quick break. Stay with us. Still more to come in this Vote 2024 election debate. We'll be right back. Welcome back to News 12's election debate for U.S. Senate, where local elections lead to national change. The reason we are here tonight, gentlemen, as you know, is because you are both vying for the seat once held by Bob Menendez. He resigned after being convicted on federal corruption and bribery charges. The Department of Justice saying he, quote, sold the power of his office. How do you make sure this doesn't happen again, Mr. Bashaw?
By having citizens do exactly what I'm doing. By having people say, you know what, we're of the people, by the people, for the people. The founders intended that citizens ran for office. They didn't necessarily intend for career politicians that stayed there forever and ever and ever, starting to look at their own interests above that of their country or their state. And so I think actions speak loudly, and to end corruption, we need people to get involved. We need to shake it up, and we need to have change. We can't have the self-dealing. The voters are sick of it. We're listening to the news in New York City right now. We heard it in New Jersey. This whole thing, this stench of corruption's been hanging out there for a long, long time. That's why I believe it's time for change, for political outsiders, not career politicians, to get engaged in this race and to win. We need a new perspective in Washington to do better for New Jersey. I don't need to do this job. I am on a mission with this job because I love our state. I love our country. I don't like being 49th. I think we can do better than what we've done in New Jersey by sending me to Washington to represent our state.
Congressman Kim, how do you make sure what happened with Bob Menendez does not happen again?
Well, we need a new era of public service and a new era of politics here in New Jersey. We need to change course, change trajectory. And that means we cannot just have the same old politics. And that's, I think, a difference between me and Mr. Bashaw. Mr. Bashaw has donated 6 figures worth of donations to political figures. He donated over $60,000 to county political chairs in the lead up to their endorsement process for this past year's primary. He opposed the actions that I took to sue the state of New Jersey to change our unfair ballot design that no other state in America does, something that was instrumental in entrenching machine politics in our state. I stood up to my party. I stood up to the brokenness in our political system. Be able to show that when there's corruption, we don't care if they're Democrats or Republicans, we're going to stand up against that. And I stood up against party leaders with the unfair system of how our election did, and we were able to change Jersey politics forever. So look, we want to make sure we have that change, but we need to show that we are doing this at a large scale, not just in New Jersey, but around the country. Probably the most popular piece of legislation I introduced as a member of Congress is legislation that would ban members of Congress from owning and trading individual stocks. Making sure we stop the conflicts of interest, the insider trading, being able to make sure we're taking these steps forward. And that is something that is going to be at the crux of what I do in the U.S. Senate to be able to fix New Jersey, fix our country, move us in a new era.
Mr. Bashaw.
Yeah, for sure. Congressman, I think it's interesting. You're trading on this in a big way right now. But the reality is you used the line process for 3 other elections before you decided it was inconvenient for you. You ran with Bob Menendez in 2018. Everyone knew what was going on with Bob Menendez. And so the fact is there's a double standard here that just isn't smack of the truth completely.
All right, we have to move on to our next topic here. And this is important to many voters right now. The U.S. Department of Education announced this week that federal student loan payments for some 8 million borrowers are going to stay on hold for another 6 months amid the legal challenges to the SAVE plan. The average resident here in New Jersey who does owe has more than $35,000 in debt, according to Forbes. Shaylin Pelucio from Manahawkin poses this question to you both.
What is your stance on student loan forgiveness?
Well, there you go. I'll start with you, Congressman Kim.
Well, look, right now, young students right now in our community, they're facing so many challenges. I talked to a young man up in North Jersey who said, that he doesn't know if he's ever going to be able to afford a house because of the high student loans and the high cost of living and challenges that are there. So I understand that we absolutely need to make sure we're taking strong efforts to be able to make education what it's always meant to be, which is about opportunity. It is the strongest tool that we have for economic mobility in our country, but it's right now squeezing that and lowering that opportunity when we see the challenges that people are facing with tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt. I've seen that in my own life. My wife and I, we had to make big decisions about our lives, when to get married, when to have kids, when to buy a house, based off of how much student loans we held and whether or not we could afford that. And that's something that, again, is squeezing it. I've pushed forward on trying to increase Pell Grants, trying to allow for forgiveness to be able to help students refinance, be able to make sure people don't get a student loan for a higher interest rate than a car loan. Those are the steps that we'll try to take.
Mr. Bashaw.
Listen, I served on the board of directors of Stockton College for 12 years. We took it from a 2,000 day student school to an 8,000 residential university. I know the burdens of higher education and what it costs. I also have been there for students' work to raise scholarship funds. I think that, college affordability is something where schools need to be accountable. The growth in expenses often outpaces inflation, and we need to make sure there's real accountability in our university system, number one. Two, we need to make sure that I love the idea of creating a contract with students, with the school, that says, here's what your 4 years are going to cost you. So they're not hit in the second and third year with random tuition increases, so that that family can budget. I think we need to be careful to do blanket forgivenesses, and that's not fair to the people that went to trade schools or people that saved for college and paid. So we've got to make sure we keep fairness at the top of this.
Okay, gentlemen, it's been quite a debate. We're already at closing statements right now. Congressman Kim, you will go first.
Well, thank you so much to News 12 for hosting this debate, and thank you to the people who were watching. This year is 50 years since my parents immigrated from South Korea to the United States. They came here because they wanted to give me and my sister a better life and more opportunities than they had. Now I'm a father. I got a 7-year-old and a 9-year-old, 2 little boys. And I'll be honest with all of you, I see the world right now, I see all the chaos and the crisis internationally, here at home. And I worry about what kind of America my kids are going to grow up in. That's why I'm here. That's why I'm trying to do this work for my kids, for your kids, your grandkids. I believe we are at an inflection point moment for this country. I think we are on an unsustainable trajectory of just toxicity and divisiveness. We have to change. I believe the next 4 to 5 years are going to shape the next 4 to 5 decades. And I want to make sure we come out strong to be able to help everyone, be able to show that our country isn't just for the well-off and the well-connected, that all families can be able to survive and thrive here. So that's what this effort is about. I did not plan to run for Senate. I'm not somebody who ever dreamed of running for office when I was a kid, but I feel a calling to serve, to be able to serve this country that has given my family so much over the last 50 years. But now I think about the next 50 years, which is the bulk of my kids' lives. What is that going to look like? And I want to make sure that we're moving forward, taking the steps to be able to change our politics, to show that I'm a Democrat that won a district, Trump won twice. I can build a politics that brings us together rather than divides us. To be able to show that we need a new generation of leadership to step up right now, to take things in a better direction, to reignite the sense of public service in this country as we approach the 250th anniversary of this great nation. And I hope people see in me the kind of public servant that is eager to step up and be able to serve the great state of New Jersey and this country through these difficult times. And I would be humbled to be able to earn the vote of the people of New Jersey. Thank you.
Mr. Bashaw, your closing.
Yes, thank you. Also, News 12, these local elections do need to lead to national change. I love your slogan. It's been an honor to be here. I'm a political outsider and a business person. My opponent has been in Washington for 4 years. To talk about change and wanting change, you've been part of the problem that we have. And so I think real change for New Jersey comes from breaking this Democratic monopoly on the Senate seat and moving to have 2 senators, 1 from each party, represent New Jersey. You know, I've put 76,000 miles on my car going to all 21 counties since January 15th. We've talked to tons and tons of voters all across this great state. People want New Jersey to be affordable and safe so that not only can their kids stay here and thrive, but that their grandkids will be here. They're sad about where the state's headed. The contrast between the two of us is clear. You know, I'm a businessman. My public service, besides Stockton and working for a Democratic agency for 2 years, the Casino Reinvestment, was to build a business that helps 800 families pay their mortgage, rent, car, tuition, and we pay taxes to fund a lot of the programs that the congressman loves to talk about. We are on the front line of the economy. That's a service. I appreciate getting the United States Chamber of Commerce endorsement for our campaign. I also believe in safety and security so that we can thrive as families. That's why I got all the law enforcement unions in New Jersey endorsed us, the PBA, the FOP, the State Troopers Association, plus 2 national troopers and police organizations. I'm proud of that. We're going to move forward for change. I will be your voice if you entrust me with your vote. And I'm an independent guy. I'm Curtis Bashaw for U.S. Senate. Thank you.
Mr. Bashaw, Congressman Kim, I want to thank both candidates for joining us. And thank you to our viewers who sent in questions and tuned in tonight. Well, that said, this has been a News 12 New Jersey Race for U.S. Senate debate. I'm Eric Landskroner. We thank you for watching tonight. Remember, local elections lead to national change.